made a promise to myself years ago when I started preaching from the floor of the sanctuary that if I wasn't ready, I wouldn't be there. And I'm not ready. Because what do you do as a pastor? You work all week on a sermon. And we have the events that happen with us, to us, and to those people up in Connecticut over the end of this past week. How can you walk away from that and not let it touch you? How can you go on with a sermon that you may have written or may have started? I don't write them on Wednesday, but throughout the week I put pieces together, whether it's on napkins or whatever. How can I continue to think that those are relevant after what happened? And I can't. But the one thing I can tell you is that this reading from Luke, this reading about John the Baptist, kind of fits. Not with just what we have here. This is the main part of it. And John is breathing some fire and brimstone, man. He's talking about winnowing forks. He's talking about fire. In fact, I heard some of that from some of the televangelists and even some of the broadcasters who used to be pastors, who are now in a news channel, say that this has happened because we've done this and this and this, and God pushed the smite button. I don't know what Bible he's reading. I think part of the problem is something that I hear throughout Christianity. We put more weight behind John's proclamation of the coming of the Messiah than we actually do with Jesus. I've heard it from pulpits. I've heard it from Lutheran pastors. I heard it from Presbyterian pastors. I certainly heard it from holiness pastors. The problem is, John is not the gospel. John is a bridge. John is the last of the prophets of the Old Covenant who is pointing to that New Covenant. And he's articulating it to the best way that he can. In fact, Jesus will say later in the Gospel of Luke, he will say, there is no other prophet greater than John. But he says that right after John sends his disciples to question Jesus. Because for me to hear John's proclamation, I also have to hear his tension, his wrestling match he has with his own cousin. Because when Jesus goes around proclaiming grace, proclaiming that we should consider those who are meek as blessed, those who are poor as blessed, those peacemakers are wonderful people, they should be blessed too. When Jesus talks about forgiveness and he starts proclaiming this grace, John, sitting in prison, is confused and sends his disciples and asks Jesus, are you the one or should we look for another? Because I'm confused, Jesus. I'm talking about fire and winnowing forks. I'm talking about wrathfulness. And you're talking about something almost completely on the other side of the coin. And I don't understand it. I'm confused. Jesus tells John's disciples, you go tell John what you see. Prisoners being set free, the lame being able to dance, the blind being able to see, those who have no voice being able to speak. Go tell John what you see happening, and you tell him I'm the right one. He'll understand. I think in times of these tragedies, we need to understand that Jesus is different than the prophets. Jesus cries out for mercy and peace, especially in this day and age when such a terrible thing happened. And the beauty of Jesus' message is it overshadows those things. It is a light that shines. Because it's the same gospel that each and every one of the disciples will be able to preach all the way to their own graves as martyrs. It'll be the same gospel that the disciples that come after the original apostles carry on to to, and they get that terrible name that the Romans cast upon them, a name that was meant to be a derogatory name. They were considered as Christians. They were Christ-like. And what the Romans were saying, you don't make any sense because you don't put up a fight. You're meek, you're mild. You go off into the Colosseums without putting up a fight. You're just like this Christ, this Messiah that we crucified. This weak one who wouldn't put up a fight. Who was not screaming wrath upon those who were persecuting, but yet from the cross said, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And I think we have to get a hold of that. The church, not just Zion, but I mean the universal church. We got to get back to our roots of who we're supposed to be. Not calling for vengeance against those who do those things to them, as terrible as they are, as horrendous as they are. We are to be a church of grace and mercy. And that's hard to hold on to in this time, but that's the message that we're given. That's what John served that purpose. He was a bridge from the old covenant to the new covenant. He was the bridge for the prophets who were talking about the Lord is my righteousness, that there's going to be a new covenant that's going to be etched upon our hearts and not on cold stone tablets. He didn't understand that, but he brought the message. He brought the message of repentance. He brought the message that actually changed hearts, even though he didn't know quite what he was supposed to be preaching. And I think that that's what we're called to do as the church. When I think about that, I think about a sermon that I heard when I was at the Festival of Homiletics this year, earlier. It was from Pastor Will Willimon, who was actually the bishop for the Methodist Church in Alabama. He was preaching to a group of future pastors at an ordination. He was talking to them about call. And he said, call is not just for pastors. The call to spread the message is for all of us. Every one of us that are baptized. He said, it was an awakening to me when I was 10. I was minding my own business in Mrs. McDonald's class at Donaldson Elementary School. I was just sitting there, just thinking about what I was going to eat for lunch, and it came over the loudspeaker. Will Mr. Will Willimon please report to the principal's office? How many of you have ever heard that at an elementary school? Fess up now. I know I did. And I know right away my mind started racing. All right. Need to let them know that I did not know that Jeffrey Quat was around that corner when I went running around the school hall and ran into him and gave him a bloody nose. It wasn't really my fault, although I should have been running in school. He's going to say that. I didn't mean to kick that ball out over the fence and us go out into the neighborhood during recess to retrieve the ball. I was doing the school service because I was getting their ball back, but I know I'm not supposed to be off the school grounds without letting a teacher know. I wonder what's waiting for me. Will Willimon felt the same way, and he said, as he describes it, as I ascended the gallows to go into the principal's office, awaiting my fate, I was sweating bullets. Got into the principal's office. The principal said, sit down. Listen clearly. I do not intend to repeat myself. I want you to go down Tyndall Avenue 2 blocks and turn left. Go down another 2 blocks to number 15. I need you to deliver me a message. And he said, the only thing I could think of was, oh, it's not about me. I'm in the clear. Until he uttered the next sentence. You tell Jimmy Spain's mother if she's not to have her son in school by this afternoon, I'm reporting her to the police for truancy. Jimmy Spain. It wasn't about me, but he's sending me into the lion's den because he is the most bulliest person in the school. He could beat up any 6th grader he wanted, and actually some 7th and 8th graders when he needed to. And by the way, what's truancy anyways? He says, pondering these thoughts, he journeyed down Tyndall, bidding farewell to the safety of the schoolyard. Walked 2 more blocks, made that turn, started to go down the street, and he realized he was going and descending into the not very nice part of town. Terra incognita, dangerous area. He left his school and now he was in a forbidden neighborhood. Number 15 was a small house with peeling paint, disordered yard, just the sort of house you expect a hoodlum like Jimmy to hang out in. He walked up on the porch, and as the wood creaked underneath him, he wondered what fate he would meet at this house. And he knocked on the screen door, which was open, and out came bursting a man, putting up his tie and putting his coat on and heading to a blue Buick sitting right at the curb. And he says, "Mister, are you Mr. Spain? Mr. Spain, are you kidding, kid? Get out of my way." And he put his coat on and got in his car and left. And he said, "I wouldn't realize until years later when I was receiving an award in the Scouts, and he pinned it on my shirt, that that was actually one of our council members of our city." He started to realize that the rumors about Jimmy's mother was true and how she was able to afford to keep him in a house at all. But as the door slammed, he knocked silently on it again, and the next thing you know, Jimmy's appearing at the door and staring at him. He said, "But you know what? The eyes of the bully didn't cut as deep as I thought they would. Kind of looked timid on the other side of that screen door." But then his mother pushed him out of the way and came forward and looked down and said, "What do you want, little boy?" "Well, I'm from the school. The principal sent me to..." "The principal? What does that old fool want now?" He sent me to say to you that everybody at the school misses Jimmy and wishes he was there today." "What?" she sneered, pulling Jimmy toward her just a bit. "It's like a special day today, and everybody wants Jimmy there." I think that's what he meant to say. Jimmy, the feared thug, who could beat up anyone he wanted, didn't look so fearful, leaning up against his mother's hip and her holding him tightly to her side. In a way, his eyes looked pleading, maybe embarrassed. "Well, you tell that old man it's none of his blankety-blank business what I do with James. James, do you want to go to that old school today?" Will said to his surprise, James looked up and shook his head yes. "Well, get your stuff and take $1 off the dresser to buy lunch. I ain't got anything to pack for you today, and just get going." In a flash, he was away and back. They started heading back to the school. Will said as he walked next to him, he didn't notice it before, but Jimmy wasn't any taller than he was. Didn't seem any bigger than he was. They kept on looking at each other, and Will said, "You know what, I never spoke to him because I really didn't have anything to say to him, and I'm sure he didn't speak to me because he didn't have anything to say to me." And as we walked, he said, "I decided now wasn't the time to begin either." They walked up the steps of the school. They made their left, went into this principal's office, and he handed him over to the secretary, and she accepted his ward. As he turned to walk away, he got a chance to look at Jimmy's eyes again. And he said, "I don't know. Maybe I saw regret, maybe embarrassment, maybe rescue." He says, "But it could have been, I also saw thanks and a sense of gratitude." That afternoon, when he went home, he told his mom about his exciting day, and she blew up. What was he thinking? Does that principal need his head examined? He's just an old fool. He said, "I heard that before. I can't believe he sent a child to do this. I have a mind to call the school and read him off." He said she never did. He says, "As I sat there listening to my mom, I thought something I never thought before. I thought she was wrong." That was the most exciting day that I ever spent at that school. And I got to understand what it meant to be called to deliver a message. It wasn't quite the message that the principal wanted me to deliver, but it was a message that gave Jimmy hope. It gave Jimmy an out. It gave Jimmy an opportunity. He said, and I thought about that 2 decades later, when a bishop put his hands over my head, and he told me as I knelt there, "I've got a message for you. You go down to Tyndale, 2 blocks, turn left, go another 2 blocks, number 15, I need you to deliver a message." And I think that that's true for the church. Not just the pastor, but we all need to deliver a message, especially in this time. A message of hope, of grace. Not a message of John the Baptist. That was the Old Testament coming to a close. But a New Testament, a new covenant of grace, hope, and mercy. A message that Jimmy was waiting to hear, and a message I suspect that the world is waiting to hear. The question is, we've been given the message, but what are we, the church, willing to do with it? Amen.